What's up guys, Asian here with the second video going over some common misconceptions and misinformation that I've seen around concerning ESO. This particular video is going to be centered around taking a look at how dots update themselves or do not update themselves based on the bar that you are on. Now this is a topic that has been covered by a few content creators. I covered it myself about 3 years ago in my Build Basics series, and Skinny Cheeks just also recently released a video covering this phenomena as well. This is something that has been known for quite a while in the PvE community. Like I said, I first put out a video here under my Build Basics video in 2018, so this is about a little over 3 years ago at this point. So we already knew back in 2018, 2017, that this was a behavior that was observed with all dot abilities. So the basic rule of thumb is that AoE dots, basically any damage over time ability that deals damage to multiple targets at a time, those will dynamically update based on the stats of the bar you are on. Single target dots, on the other hand, snapshot the stats of the bar that you are on, with the exception of a couple of different statistics which I'll go over in a little bit here. This also is true for any sort of passive abilities as well, the big one being the Lightning Staff and Inferno Staff passive abilities from the Ancient Knowledge passive. So the passive would be under the Destruction Staff line under Ancient Knowledge here. So while you have an Inferno Staff equipped, you increase your damage done with single target abilities by 10%, and Lightning Staff increases your damage done with AoE abilities by 10%. So there are a few content creators out there that believe that by having a Lightning Staff on your back bar, you're basically improving the AoE damage in its entirety, so basically as for the duration of the AoE dot. That is not the case because AoE dots do dynamically update. This is just a really quick build that I put together here. The only difference here is really the staff type here. So we don't have any bonuses, any buffs. Those are all off here except for the ones that are innately enabled. The only real difference here is basically the Inferno versus the Lightning Staff. So we'll see here that if we swap to our back bar here, all of our dots do increase in value. All our AoE dots increase in value. So Mystic Orb, 1674, and 51 for Blockade, 6830 for Eruption, and 1706 for the damage over time. But once you swap to your front bar here, you'll see that all of these values go down, and the damage that you deal with these abilities will likewise also go down. And this is reflected here in this video that I did, where I basically did the exact same thing, where I had a charged front bar, and then I had a Nirnhone back bar. So the only difference between my two bars was my spell damage bonus. And if we go ahead and move forward a little bit here, so this is the front bar for an AoE dot, so this is Twisting Path. And then once we swap to our Nirnhone bar, you'll see that the damage goes up to 908. So our damage is dynamically updating because we have higher spell damage on that Nirnhone bar compared to the front bar, which I believe I had a charged staff instead. Now, with the single target dots, these snapshot your max resources based on the bar where the first tick of the dot happens. So there is some travel time involved with pretty much all single target dots. So Destructive Clench, for example. In this instance, I was testing on a Magicka Nightblade, so I was using Crippling Grasp. There is a slight travel time for these projectiles. The stats of the bar that you are on when these projectiles hit the enemy are the stats that are being used for the duration of the dot. This is what's called a snapshot. And so single target dots snapshot the stats of the bar where the first tick happens. So in this particular video, I was describing how some Magicka Nightblade builds have Crippling Grasp on the back bar just due to the way that back then the abilities that you had to have on your front bar, there wasn't really any space for Crippling Grasp. So a lot of Magicka Nightblades in the past would use Crippling Grasp as the final ability on the back bar in order to bar swap cancel the animation, so you would be on your front bar, which had the higher statistics. And so your Crippling Grasp would still inherit the damage from your front bar because that is the bar that you were on when the dot first ticked. So that's basically how dots update. So again, general rule of thumb, AoE dots dynamically update based on your spell damage, your max magicka, and any sort of passive abilities that you have on the bar that you are currently on. So if you cast lightning blockade, for example, on your back bar, and you switch to your front bar, you're losing out on the additional 10% damage bonus from the lightning staff ancient knowledge passive if you don't have lightning staff on your front bar as well. So rather than boosting all the AoEs on your back bar, then you're actually gimping yourself a little bit by having an inferior blockade. Blockade of fire is going to be stronger than blockade of storms. Plus, you're also losing out on light attack damage, because light attack damage is considered a single target effect. So you'll be losing out on light attack damage on your back bar as well. So again, both Skinny and I have done videos demonstrating this with actual floating damage numbers. So this video here, Build Basics Damage Over Time abilities, this was published, again, over 3 years ago now at this point. And Skinny just recently released a video in December, a couple of days ago. I'll put the timestamp down below as well, but how these abilities also update as well. The sole exception to the single target dot rule is poison injection, and that's mainly because of the way poison injection works. So poison injection does have a execute rider to it, so it deals a certain amount of additional damage to enemies under 50% health, so it constantly has to update itself in order to determine whether or not it needs to apply that execute damage. So poison injection is the only exception to the single target dot snapshotting. The only things that are dynamically updating for both types of dots, so both single target and AoE dots, are your critical chance, your critical damage, and your penetration. That is covered in this video, the Build Basics Damage Over Time abilities video that I did, again, over 3 years ago. So this is all knowledge that we knew about 3 to 4 years ago, the certain statistics and stuff that are inherited by your dots. And keep in mind too, this also carries over to weapon traits as well. So for example, if you had a charged back bar and you swap to your front bar, you are not getting the charge bonus from your back bar abilities, because unless you have charge on your front bar as well. It's the same thing with stats like powered for healers. Powered would only affect the heals if it is active on the bar you are on. You can basically think of passives and weapon traits as essentially buffs, named buffs onto your character. And AoE dots and AoE healing, those are AoE heal over time abilities, those are all based on the buff that you have on your character at the time, at any point in time. Single target dots, on the other hand, will snapshot the buff that you have on your character and will not update, except for, of course, penetration, crit chance, and crit damage. Damage done modifiers are also inherited in that snapshot, I believe. And the same thing with AoE dots, where it's going to dynamically update based on the damage done modifiers that you have on the bar that you're currently on when the dot is ticking. So front bar versus back bar. This is why a lot of people put AoE dots on their back bars for PvE builds, because you're going to be having, generally speaking, higher stats on your front bar, so it doesn't matter if you have AoE dots on your back bar, because they're going to be taking harder once you switch to your front bar regardless. And that's why most builds have their single target dots on the front bar rather than the back bar, because they snapshot the abilities rather than dynamically update. So you want to make sure to have those higher stats once that first tick happens for your single target dot abilities. Well, that pretty much covers how dots update their damage in ESO. Again, there will be links in the description below to both of these two videos that I referenced. So the Build Basics Damage Over Time abilities that I did 3 years ago, as well as Skinny Cheek's far more recent video covering how dots update themselves. Hope you guys learned something from this video, and I will see you guys later.